I stood at my own front door for 7 minutes before I could bring myself to knock. The yellow paint was peeling near the bottom where the winter snow had beaten against it, and Sarah's little handprints were still pressed into the mud beside the welcome mat, remnants of a spring day I'd missed. When I finally raised my knuckles to the wood, my hand trembled. Not from the weight of my duffel bag or the exhaustion that had settled into my bones during the 26-hour journey home, but from a fear I hadn't expected. A fear that somehow in the space of 2 deployments I had become a stranger in my own life. The door opened and there was Linda, my wife, beautiful as ever but with new lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and single parenthood. But behind her legs, barely visible, was a pair of curious brown eyes and a shock of auburn hair that had grown longer than I remembered. Sarah, my daughter, my everything. Daddy's home, sweetheart, Linda said softly, stepping aside to let me through the threshold. The little girl, my little girl, pressed closer to her mother's legs and looked up with those eyes that were so much like Linda's. Her voice, when it came, was small and uncertain. Mommy, who is this? I have been shot at in Kandahar. I have carried wounded soldiers through firefights in Baghdad. I have seen things that will visit my dreams until the day I die. But nothing had ever hit me like those 4 words from my 6-year-old daughter's mouth. My name is Michael James Carson. I'm 32 years old, though some days I feel like I've lived twice that. I enlisted when I was 19, fresh out of high school with more patriotism than sense and a head full of movies about heroes coming home to ticker tape parades. That was before I understood that the hardest battles aren't always fought with bullets and bombs. I served 2 tours, the first in Afghanistan from 2018 to 2019, the second in Iraq from 2021 to 2022. Sergeant First Class, 101st Airborne Division. I was good at my job, maybe too good. Good enough that they kept sending me back when other soldiers rotated home to their families. Good enough that I convinced myself each time that one more deployment would make a difference, would justify all the time away from the people who mattered most. When Sarah was born, I was home for 6 months, 6 perfect months where I changed diapers and walked the floors at 3 a.m. singing off-key lullabies about soldiers coming home. She was 3 when I left for Afghanistan the first time, old enough to wave goodbye from Linda's arms, young enough to think Daddy was just going on a long trip and would be back for bedtime stories soon. When I returned from that first deployment, she ran to me at the airport, her little arms stretched wide, shouting, "Daddy, Daddy," at the top of her lungs. The joy in her voice could have powered the entire terminal. But by the time I left for Iraq 8 months later, she was 4 and starting to understand that Daddy's trips weren't like other daddies' business trips. They were longer, they were dangerous, and sometimes daddies who went on trips like that didn't come home at all. Now she was 6 and I was a stranger. That first night back, Linda and I sat on the couch after Sarah had gone to bed, the silence between us heavy with words we didn't know how to say. The house felt different, smaller somehow, as if it had shrunk in my absence. The furniture had been rearranged. There were pictures on the mantel I hadn't seen before: Sarah's first day of kindergarten, a birthday party I'd missed, dance recitals attended by grandparents who had flown in to fill the space I'd left empty. "She talks about you," Linda said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "She asks when you're coming home. But it's been a long time, Mike. For a little kid, 8 months feels like forever." I nodded, not trusting my voice. 8 months. 243 days to be exact. I had counted every one of them in the desert heat and the monsoon rains, through mortar attacks and convoy runs and the endless grinding routine of a war that felt like it would never end. I had counted them down to this moment, this homecoming that was supposed to fix everything. "I don't know how to do this anymore," I admitted. "Over there everything made sense. You follow orders, you complete the mission, you bring your people home. Here," I gestured helplessly at the photos on the mantel, "here I don't know what the mission is." Linda reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. They felt unfamiliar at first, then achingly familiar. "The mission is the same as it's always been," she said. "Love your family, be present, be her father. But she doesn't even know me." "Then you'll have to start over. We'll all have to start over." The next morning I woke before dawn out of habit. In the desert we were always up before the sun preparing for whatever the day might bring. Here in the stillness of my own bedroom with Linda sleeping peacefully beside me and the sound of early birds beginning their chorus outside, the quiet felt almost oppressive. I was used to the constant noise of helicopters, radio chatter, the hum of generators. This peace felt foreign. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table looking out at the backyard. There was a swing set I didn't remember buying, painted bright red and blue. A sandbox filled with toy trucks and plastic dinosaurs, evidence of a childhood continuing without me. Sarah appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She saw me and stopped, suddenly shy again. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice soft and non-threatening. The same voice I used to calm frightened civilians in villages half a world away. She didn't answer, just stood there studying me with those serious brown eyes. "Are you hungry? I could make pancakes." I had no idea if she even liked pancakes anymore. 6-year-olds changed their minds about things like that, I'd heard. Hell, I didn't even know if I still remembered how to make them. "Mommy makes the pancakes," she said finally. "Well, maybe I could help Mommy make them when she wakes up." A small nod. Progress. Linda appeared a few minutes later, moving around the kitchen with the easy efficiency of a mother who had learned to do everything herself. Sarah climbed onto her lap at the breakfast table, shooting occasional glances in my direction as if I might disappear if she looked away too long. "Daddy was a soldier," Linda explained as she mixed the pancake batter. "He had to go far away to help other people, but now he's home to stay. Isn't that nice?" Sarah considered this information seriously. "Did you fight bad guys?" I felt something twist in my chest. How do you explain war to a 6-year-old? How do you tell her about the things you've seen and done without giving her nightmares? "Sometimes," I said carefully. "But mostly I helped good people who needed help." "Like a superhero?" The innocence in her question almost broke me. "Not like a superhero, sweetheart, just like a regular person trying to do the right thing." But I could see the wheels turning in her little head, and for the first time since I'd walked through that door, she looked at me with something other than suspicion. She looked at me with curiosity. That afternoon, while Linda ran errands, Sarah and I found ourselves alone together for the first time. She was playing with dolls in the living room, creating elaborate scenarios involving tea parties and magic princesses. I sat nearby, pretending to read a magazine but really just watching her, marveling at how much she had grown, how articulate she had become, how her personality was emerging in ways I had missed entirely. "Tell me a story," she said suddenly, looking up from her dolls. "What kind of story?" "A soldier story. About the bad guys." I hesitated. Linda and I hadn't discussed what was appropriate to share, how much reality a 6-year-old could handle. But there was something in Sarah's expression, a hunger for connection, for understanding of what had taken her father away for so long. "Well," I began slowly, "there was once a soldier who was stationed at a base in a very hot, dusty place, and this soldier's job was to go out into nearby villages and make sure everyone there was safe." Sarah scooted closer, her dolls forgotten. "One day he went to a village where there was a little girl about your age. She had lost her favorite toy, a small wooden horse that her grandfather had carved for her. She was crying because she couldn't find it anywhere. What did the soldier do? He helped her look for it. He and his friends searched the whole village. They looked under market stalls and behind houses and in the tall grass by the river. And finally they found it stuck in a tree where the wind had blown it." "Did the little girl get her horse back?" "She did, and when the soldier gave it to her, she smiled the biggest smile he had ever seen. It reminded him of someone very special back home." Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing the story. "Who did it remind him of?" "Someone he loved very much. Someone who had a smile just as beautiful." She seemed satisfied with this answer and returned to her dolls. But as the afternoon wore on, she kept glancing at me, and I could see her thinking. That evening, after dinner and baths and the usual bedtime routine that I watched rather than participated in, Linda tucked Sarah into bed while I stood awkwardly in the doorway of her room. It was painted purple now, her favorite color, apparently, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that I had never seen before. "Daddy," Sarah called out as Linda was turning off the light. Will you tell me another soldier story tomorrow? The hope in her voice was almost too much to bear. If you want me to, I do. And for the first time in 3 days she looked directly at me when she said good night. The stories became our ritual. Every evening after dinner and before bed, Sarah would curl up on the couch next to me, at first maintaining a careful distance, gradually moving closer as the nights passed, and ask for another soldier story. I told her about the soldier who shared his chocolate with children in a refugee camp, about the soldier who taught village boys how to play soccer with a ball made of old rags and tape, about the soldier who learned to say thank you and how are you in Arabic and Pashto, because it was important to be polite, even when you were far from home. I was careful to edit out the violence, the fear, the moments when I wasn't sure I would make it home at all. But slowly, through these stories, I began to share the parts of my deployment that had meaning beyond the mission parameters. The humanity I had witnessed and participated in, the connections I had made with people whose names I might never know but whose faces I would never forget. And Sarah began to understand, in the way that children understand complicated things, that her father hadn't just been away, he had been needed. That the long absence hadn't been a choice between her and something else, but a duty that had required the hardest kind of sacrifice. Was the soldier lonely? She asked one night, after a story about sharing Thanksgiving dinner with locals who had become friends. Sometimes, I admitted, he missed his family very much. Did he think about them every day, every single day, when he woke up in the morning and when he went to sleep at night, and all the times in between? She nodded solemnly. I thought about you too, Daddy, even when I couldn't remember what you looked like. The honesty of it hit me like a physical blow. Children don't lie to spare your feelings. They tell you the truth, even when it hurts. I'm sorry I was gone so long, sweetheart. Are you going to go away again? No, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. I'm done being a soldier now. I'm just going to be a daddy. Good, she said, snuggling closer to my side. I like having you here. 3 weeks into my homecoming, Linda and I had our first real fight. Not the careful walking on eggshells conversations we'd been having, but an honest-to-God argument about money and responsibilities, and the fact that I had been applying for jobs without consulting her about what kind of work I wanted to do, or where I wanted to do it. You can't just make decisions for all of us anymore, Mike, she said, her voice rising in frustration. You've been gone for most of the last 4 years. I've been handling everything, the bills, the parenting, the decision-making. You can't just walk back in and expect to take over. She was right, and I knew it. But knowing it and accepting it were different things. In the military, hierarchy was clear. Orders came down from above, and you followed them. Civilian life, family life, was messier, more complicated. It required negotiation and compromise, and a kind of patience I had forgotten how to practice. I don't want to take over, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I realized that wasn't entirely true. I just want to contribute. I want to feel useful. You are useful. You're Sarah's father. You're my husband. That's not nothing, Mike. That's everything. But it didn't feel like everything. It felt like I was playing catch-up in a game where everyone else knew the rules, and I was still trying to figure out which direction to run. Sarah found us in the kitchen afterward, voices raised, tension crackling between us like static electricity. She looked from Linda to me and back again, her face serious and worried. Are you fighting because Daddy came home? She asked. The question stopped us cold. Linda knelt down to Sarah's level, smoothing her hair away from her face. No, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, but that doesn't mean anyone is in trouble. Daddy and I are just learning how to be a family again. Oh, Sarah considered this. Is it hard? Sometimes, Linda admitted, but the best things are sometimes hard. That night, Sarah asked for a different kind of story. Tell me about a soldier who came home, she said. I thought for a moment, choosing my words carefully. There was once a soldier who had been away for a very long time. When he finally came home, everything felt different. His house looked the same but somehow smaller. His family looked the same but somehow changed, and he realized that while he had been gone, life had continued without him. Was he sad? He felt like he didn't know how to fit into his old life anymore. Like maybe there wasn't a place for him. What did he do? Well, at first he tried to make everything go back to the way it was before, but that didn't work because everyone had grown and changed, including him. So he had to learn how to build something new, something that was better than what he had before because it included all the ways everyone had grown. Did it work? It took time, and patience, and a lot of help from people who loved him. But yes, eventually it worked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then Daddy, yes, sweetheart, I'm glad you came home. Me too, baby girl. Me too. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that made everything shimmer, and Linda suggested we take a camping trip to the lake where she and Sarah had gone the previous year while I was deployed. At first, the idea filled me with anxiety. Too much open space, too many variables I couldn't control. But Sarah was excited about the prospect of showing me the trails she had hiked and the swimming hole where she had learned to float, and I realized that my discomfort mattered less than her joy. We packed the car with sleeping bags and camp stoves and enough sunscreen to protect a small army. Sarah chattered the entire 2-hour drive, pointing out landmarks and telling me stories about her previous adventures with Mommy. For the first time since I'd been home, I felt like I was part of a family narrative rather than an observer trying to catch up. The campground was busy but not crowded, filled with families making the kind of memories that would last long after the mosquito bites faded and the smell of campfire smoke washed out of their clothes. We set up our tent near the water, and Sarah immediately appointed herself as my guide and instructor. This is where the fish like to hide, she explained, leading me to a shady spot where the water was deep and cool, and over there is where the rocks are best for skipping. Mommy taught me, but I'm not very good yet. I spent the afternoon teaching her how to select the right stones, how to hold them, how to snap her wrist just so. Her throws were enthusiastic if not always successful, but her laughter carried across the water like music. This was what I had been fighting for, I realized. Not abstract concepts like freedom and democracy, but this specific moment, my daughter's joy, my wife's smile, the simple pleasure of being together in a beautiful place. That evening, as we sat around the campfire roasting marshmallows and watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, Sarah crawled into my lap and rested her head against my chest. "Tell me a story, Daddy," she said, her voice drowsy with exhaustion and fresh air. "What kind of story?" "The best soldier story. The most important one." I looked across the fire at Linda, who nodded encouragingly. This was my moment, I realized. The story that would help Sarah understand not just where I had been but why I had needed to come home. "There was once a soldier," I began, "who was stationed very far from home. He was a good soldier, and he did important work, but every single day he thought about the people he loved. He carried pictures of them in his pocket, and when things got scary or difficult, he would look at those pictures and remember why he was fighting." Sarah shifted against me, getting comfortable. This soldier had a little girl back home, and she was the most important thing in his whole world. When he woke up in the morning, his first thought was of her. When he went to sleep at night, his last thought was of her. He wondered what she was learning in school, what games she was playing, whether she still liked the same songs and stories and foods. Did he write her letters? He did. And he sent her pictures and little gifts when he could. But what he wanted most was to see her smile, to hear her laugh, to tuck her into bed at night and tell her stories face to face. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up into the darkness. The soldier knew that his job was important, that he was helping people who needed help, but he also knew that the most important job he had was being a father. And you can't be a father from far away. You can love from far away, but you can't be present from far away. You can't make pancakes or teach stone skipping or tell bedtime stories from far away. Sarah was very quiet now, and I could feel her thinking. So one day the soldier decided that he had done enough good work in the faraway place. It was time to come home and do the most important work of all, being a daddy to his little girl. "Is that why you came home, Daddy? To be my daddy?" The question hung in the air between us, simple and profound. Around us, Other families were having their own conversations, making their own memories. But in this moment, it felt like Sarah and I were the only two people in the world. Yes, I said, my voice thick with emotion. That's exactly why I came home. Because being your daddy is the most important job I'll ever have. She sat up then and looked at me in the firelight, her face serious and beautiful and so much older than her 6 years. I remember you now, she said softly. I remember that you're my daddy, and you love me, and you tell the best stories. And just like that, the last wall between us crumbled. Not because of some grand gesture or dramatic moment, but because a little girl finally understood that the stranger who had knocked on her door was the same person who had loved her from thousands of miles away, who had carried her picture through desert storms and monsoon rains, who had come home not as a conquering hero, but as a father who just wanted to be present for the life he had helped create. We've been home from the camping trip for 2 months now, and I'm still learning how to be a civilian, how to be a husband, how to be a father in peacetime. I found work with a local construction company, physical labor that feels honest and clean, building things instead of tearing them down. The pay isn't great, but it's enough, and more importantly, it ends at 5 p.m. every day, so I can be home for dinner and bedtime stories. Sarah starts first grade next week, and she's both excited and nervous about this new adventure. She's asked me to walk her to school on the first day, and I've already arranged to take the morning off work. It's a small thing maybe, but it feels enormous to me, the chance to be present for one of those milestone moments that mark a childhood. Linda and I are still figuring things out, still learning how to be partners instead of just two people trying to survive in the same house. We've started going to counseling together, which helps us translate between the people we were before I left and the people we've become since I've been back. It's hard work, this business of rebuilding a marriage, but it's good work, necessary work. Last night, Sarah asked for a story as usual, but when I finished, she had one of her own to tell. There was once a little girl, she said, snuggled against my side in the gathering dusk, who had a daddy who went away to help people. She was sad that he was gone, and sometimes she forgot what he looked like. But she never forgot that he loved her, because love doesn't go away even when people do. I felt my throat tighten with unshed tears. And one day her daddy came home, and at first she didn't recognize him because she was little when he left and bigger when he came back. But then he told her stories, and she remembered that he was the same person who used to sing her to sleep and make funny voices for all her stuffed animals. And then what happened? I managed to ask. Then they lived happily ever after, she said matter-of-factly, because that's what families do. They figure out how to be happy together, out of the mouths of babes. I am 32 years old. I am a veteran of 2 wars. I have seen things that will stay with me forever, done things that required a kind of courage I didn't know I possessed. But nothing I accomplished in uniform compares to this, the simple profound gift of being recognized by my own daughter, of being welcomed home not as a hero or a stranger, but as exactly what I am, a father who loves his child enough to lay down his weapons and pick up bedtime stories instead. The war is over for me now. The real battle, the daily work of being present, being patient, being the father Sarah deserves, has just begun. And for the first time in years, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, home,